Good morning, and you're very welcome to this week's Inside Workplace Wellbeing series. So, as I just do a few bits of housekeeping here to get everything set up, apologies before we start. Now we are good to go. I'm delighted this week to be joined by Lydia Garland Moloney in this episode of Inside Workplace Wellbeing, because Lydia has expertise in human resource management and employee law corporate compliance. She also has a really great breadth of experience across legal compliance, employer-employee relations, business and organisation culture and strategy, employee branding, learning development, talent acquisition, and management of the full employee life cycle. So Lydia brings together this huge plethora of wonderful skills that she goes into businesses with. So on that note, welcome, Lydia, and I'm delighted to have you here to share all about these wonderful things that you do with companies.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be on here and having the conversation with you, Dolores. I think we have a jam-packed schedule to get through. It's fantastic.
We certainly do, because it's such a big area. And of course, what we're talking about is unlocking HR excellence, bridging policy and wellness for a thriving workplace. So there is so much to talk about. So Lydia, you're the founder of HR Options, and you bring this, as I say, holistic business consulting experience and all of your tools with you to people. And I suppose today we're talking about, the question is, are companies really equipped to handle HR challenges that come up on a day-to-day basis? And, do they have the right policies in place for this? And also, I think the most important one as well is, how does the absence of defined perimeters impact employees' sense of safety? So the whole psychological safety piece and policies. Would you like to, of course, first maybe introduce yourself, and then let's go into talking about the whole policies and why they're so important to have them in place?
Absolutely. Well, I founded HR Options last year, so we're talking June 2023. And I came to consulting through, I did a law degree and then a postgrad in employment law, and then a few other business postgrads as well. So very much that, as you say, that holistic approach. I was in a company for over 6 years in building up the HR experience and the HR exposure, and then decided last year I'd reached a point where it made sense and I would really enjoy going into consulting. And as you called out at the beginning there, it's very much a full scope. So everything from your foundational policies and procedures to your employee relations, strategies, investigations, disciplinaries, appeals, and everything in between, that full employee life cycle management.
And that's phenomenal, because it's not just one thing or another. Sure, it's not really. And I think it really isn't, like my background is 20 years in law as well, believe it or not, before I transitioned into wellness after the recession of 2008 when I got kicked out of my legal career. So I come in with a legal background, but, I suppose I always have at the back of my mind how important it is to have the right things in place. And that's why we're talking about having the right policies in place and bringing you in as the legal expert, because it's all very well to have wellness in the workplace, wellness workshops, whatever, which is the area that I do. But I love the way you talk about wellness policies and bookending, the whole policies and the whole HR area, because it is so important to have those policies in place, as I mentioned, for employee psychological safety.
Absolutely. And your wellness and your HR policies very much should bookend your company's strategy and the foundation to your company. I think your wellness policies are, or your HR policies are the foundations, and putting in writing your wellness policies. So the only way to really create that psychological safety in the workplace is making sure that everyone understands what's expected of them, what they can and can't do, what will happen if they're late, what will happen if they're late a few times. Things that seem very minor to an employer help create that safety net for employees on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. I mean, it's about expectations, isn't it? I mean, I know when we were talking before, I always bring it back to kind of parenting as well, because it's often said by experts that children love boundaries because at least they know what's expected from them. And we can take that into all areas of our life. And I think that the expectations, having them clear and transparent, is so important for employee engagement and that whole piece.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it very much is the HR is the handrail or the guardrail, if you like. If you picture a company as a staircase, maybe you'll only touch the handrail a few times as you're going down the stairs, or maybe you'll grip it tightly. It'll depend on the day. But if you're going down the stairs and you don't have a handrail at all, you're really going to notice that, and you're really going to feel unsteady and insecure as you're going down the stairs.
I love that. I love that. That's a great visual to have. And, I suppose as well as having HR policies in place, it's important that managers know how to implement those policies, because having something in writing and maybe nobody knows how to access them, neither managers nor employees. So what do you say to companies when you go into them about the whole, let's say you were going into a company, where do you begin with them about policies and the importance of people knowing how to access them and use them when they're there? That's a whole load wrapped in that, I know, but let's start off by talking about what would you say to a company, say, that's starting off and needs to understand how important it is to put them in place.
No, well, this is it. And a lot of companies will have a handbook that's gathering dust in the corner, and maybe they'll blow the dust off when they need to do an investigation or a disciplinary. But really, it should be a living, whether it's a handbook or a code of conduct, or your policies are split across 10 different books. Whatever it might be, it should be a living document that employees know where to find, know how to ask questions. And a lot of the times when companies do have that, the bit that might fall down will be, as you say, the manager training, that managers are aware of the policies. The managers maybe have browsed through the handbook or read the handbooks themselves. But when an employee comes to them with a question, the only answer they can give them is what they've read themselves in the handbook. So having that training around, okay, these are what the policies are. This is how we live those policies. This is how we live the culture through the handbook and through the policies. And then going a step further and being able to coach your managers on having difficult conversations. That if you have an absence issue or a disciplinary issue coming up, that you know how to have that conversation in a way that creates that wellness and that psychological safety with the employee, that they don't feel that their dignity isn't being respected.
I love that, because, there is a conversation that people have around sometimes that managers are the squeezed people in an organization and sometimes it's done unconsciously. Everyone is busy trying to be productive in the company, and maybe the owners, the managers, CEOs put in these policies. Maybe the managers haven't been trained in their job, as you say, with all these important ways to actually implement the policies. And then we have the employees. So it's like these three tiers. So everybody really needs to be on singing from the same hymn sheet in relation to these, because they're essential. It's not just having a policy in place for the fun. I mean, these really are fundamental needs that everybody has in an organization, because at the end of the day, it is about employee engagement from every one of these tiers we have. We want our managers to be engaged so that they can lead productive teams. And I know that you actually do work with managers.
I do indeed. And that's a very fundamental part of it. Of if people don't feel comfortable having the conversation, then they just won't have the conversation.
Yeah.
So it's giving people that safety, your managers that safety, to say, okay, I've had that training. I know how to sit down and have that return to work conversation. I know how to do that performance review, that probation review. I know that maybe I have a difficult piece of that I need, whether it's timekeeping or something more serious, that I need to talk about with that employee. And I've had the coaching, I've had the training, I know how to do this. And so I can do this in a way that's safe for me as a manager, but also safe for the employee having the conversation.
And I know you mentioned to me before about sometimes where managers, you can say this so eloquently, like not all managers like apply for these jobs. They go into a new company, they apply to be manager. Sometimes it can be because they were an employee first before being a manager.
Well, this is it. A lot of the time people get promoted into management positions because they're very good at doing the thing that they were doing before they were a manager. So it's not necessarily that they're coaches, that they're people managers at heart or have that training previously. It's they had the skills and the expertise. They had it to such an extent that they were promoted into supervising or managing other people with those skills and expertise. But the actual people management side of it can get left to the wayside a little bit. So it's important to bring that back in and loop that in with your policies and procedures as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I love you talking, like you say, the full employee life cycle, because it really is from onboarding all the way through, isn't it? How important it is to keep everyone engaged at each part of the journey. And we do this by having policies and by then ensuring that everybody knows how to implement these policies, and how employees, of course, as well, can access them, who they talk to, what's the pathway to getting information on these challenges that may come up on a day-to-day basis. Let's say, like, for example, can you talk a little bit about maybe absenteeism, and how having no policy in place and maybe just an ad hoc approach to absenteeism can cause employees to not feel safe around the procedure, let's say?
It's very easy to create this ripple effect of insecurity or feeling unsure within your employees, and absenteeism and lateness is a very perfect example of that, where you can have maybe no policies in place, or policies that aren't being followed or trained on properly in place, and one manager doesn't mind if someone is 15 minutes late, but another manager minds very much, and they may go down a disciplinary route for being 15 minutes late a few times. One manager doesn't mind an email, another manager needs a phone call, and the employees don't know which manager is which, who do I report to in this specific situation. All these questions bubble up if it's not in writing and adhered to and properly trained. And you end up in a situation potentially where you'll have one employee saying to another employee, well, Barbara was late 3 times last week and she ended up getting a final written warning or a verbal warning or whatever the company chose to discipline on. But then Johnny was late 7 times a few months ago and nothing happened on that one. And you have the many layers of insecurity building up throughout the workforce.
Yeah, and Lydia, let's say there is a policy in place around this area of being late and all that. How does an employee find that out? Is it something that should be, like, that they should know about from the onboarding stage? And if it's not, what steps do you think the employee should take to ask? Is it they go to HR, or if there's not a HR, if it's a small company? Can we talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question to ask. And it is different for every company. So some companies will have maybe company intranet, and they can pop a staff handbook or a code of conduct or all their policies and procedures in there. Some companies, maybe if you're on the smaller side, you might be looking at written documents or emailing things over. It absolutely is something that should be legally provided to. So when you're giving your contract, your job description, your handbook should be in there, or your code of conduct, whatever way your policies are structured, should be in there as part of that onboarding proceeding. If you've missed that step, don't panic, but just do make sure you're getting those policies out to the employee as soon as you can, and that they have ready access to it. So like I say, if you're smaller, maybe an email, popping everything over in an email is perfect. If you're bigger and you have something like Slack or an intranet, any kind of an online hub, a Moodle, if you're a university structure, then put it up there. Make sure that you're releasing when you're doing your updates, that you're letting everybody know. Hey, just let everyone know we've done our annual update on our staff handbook, and now we have an AI policy in there that wasn't in there before, or we've updated our sick leave policy. Whatever it might be, that you're in constant communication with your employees is what it boils down to.
And I think that's very important, actually, because what you said there, I mean, and even me as a solopreneur, when GDPR came in there a couple of years ago, we were all putting up our policies and that. But it's important, actually, go back in and actually do an update. And it's something that, especially if you're a small company and may not have a dedicated HR department, we don't even, those kind of things like updating policies isn't something that maybe at the forefront of our mind unless we find ourselves in a challenging situation. And I suppose for small companies, it's great for them to have access to someone like yourself, because it's not that they may not have the capacity, even office space wise, to have a dedicated HR person. They mightn't have the need for it all the time, but there's certainly, a need legally, in order to be legally compliant, to be able to bring in someone with like the expertise that you have, in order to remind them, well, when was the last time you actually updated your policies? Because maybe they did a policy, and let's say Mark Duffy was the person that was manager, and the employees were told to report to him, but maybe Mark has now left the company and his name is still there. If it's not brought up, the employee might be very shy, doesn't know where to ask. And then it comes to a situation where the policy hasn't been updated. So it is very important, I could imagine, that everything is updated.
Absolutely, on several levels. On your baseline legal level, absolutely. On, as you say, things change, it should be a living document. But it does also come back to the psychological safety piece. If an employee is reading through your policies and they see, oh, there's actually 10 public holidays, but they have listed 9 here because it's out of date from a couple of years ago. Or, oh, they have 3 days SSP, but there's actually 5. And then next year there's going to be 7. So that's not right either. If they're reading through, oh, there's 7 weeks parental leave here, but actually in August this year it moved to 9. They're reading through all these different policies and all these different things that aren't quite right. And as they're reading through, the trust is slowly being eroded that, oh, well, if there's all these different mistakes and all these different things that are out of date in this policy, oh, why should I bother with it? Or maybe I shouldn't trust this document at all. And you're sowing some seeds that you don't want to be sowing as an employer in there. So it's so important, as you say, Dolores, even if you don't have a dedicated HR person in team, bring in a consultant once a year, once every couple of years. I'd recommend once a year to do a clean sweep through the whole document, update the employment law pieces. If your culture's shifted a little bit, update the wording, the phrasing, new policies. Maybe you want to strip out some old policies. It's really important to do that update, because they say once a year would be best practice.
Absolutely, because it makes companies sustainable as well. And, at bottom line, companies want higher productivity. And to have higher productivity, we want engaged employees, because the figures are staggering, the amount of people that aren't engaged at work. And having these clear boundaries in place, these policies, is so essential, really, and good for everyone. From the top down, it's not just something fluffy that we do once a year. It's essential. Now, coming out of that conversation, the whole area of keeping up to date with current legislation, because we talked about one that I didn't even know was in place, because I'm not in your area, and I don't keep up to date with HR law. But when we were talking, you mentioned about the recent legislative changes, like the right to disconnect. And I really honed in on that in our conversation, because when I'm in doing workplace wellbeing, sometimes it's like about work-life balance. And there again, there's actually something in the legislation around the right to disconnect. So again, that's something obviously that it's so important that companies stay compliant and avoid potential legal risks around going outside the parameters of what's actually the law around this. Can you talk to us about that legislative change that came in, the right to disconnect?
Yeah, so it very much is a wellness piece. So when I'm talking about the right to disconnect, most practitioners will refer back to the WRC Code of Practice. And it's a great way for employers to stay up to date as well. They keep their LinkedIn up to date, so I'd recommend subscribing on that front too. But that right to disconnect that came in a couple of years ago, it guarantees the employee the right to not be contacted outside of their work hours unduly. Now, business needs, so occasionally that's just going to be necessary as part of running a business. But it means that the constant emails that you see in quite a few professions shouldn't be happening outside of the work hours. That the calls, that can you come in? And then the other piece to it is not to be penalized for either not going to a work event outside of hours or something arranged by work outside of hours. Employees now have the right not to be penalized for not attending that. And it's a very subtle thing, and it's very difficult to prove, but it is an important one for employers to bear in mind and to make sure that they have as part of their policies and procedures, that they have that right to disconnect piece.
Love it. Yeah, and it is important. It's like not just important, it's essential. Because I think, again, like with the whole pandemic and people beginning to work from home, that really opened up a complete newness, a change. And we were forced to make changes at that time. And I'm sure that there, a lot of this legislation maybe came about because of changes in the work environment, and a lot more people working hybrid, a lot more people, well, we all had to work from home at that time. So, but where do the boundaries blur? So yeah, hugely important, I think. And I love that there is actually something in the legislation that requires and that puts in writing, again, the right to disconnect. So I love that one. And now we're coming on to the really juicy topic, which I love talking about as well. It's about another recent legislative change. That's not really a change, actually. It's about AI. So like AI is here to stay. It's not a buzzword. Oh, how do I create a policy around AI? It's integrated into all our lives, whether we like it or not. So it's about navigating AI in a very mindful way that actually brings, again, going back to this whole employee engagement bit. And as a wellness trainer, I've seen that one of the biggest challenges with AI from an employee's perspective is that they fear the introduction of AI on some level. It's whether it's not knowing how they're being tracked. And I know there was a chat. This chat has come up a lot more because PwC, they recently, said they were changing their policies around it, and that brought up fear for some people. So it kind of created a conversation that now people are looking to see what the boundaries are again in AI. And really, it comes down to the bottom line, again, in my opinion, when I go in, is understanding the needs of the people. Because when we understand employees' needs, then we can put policies and we can put wellness let's say, workshops in place to actually understand how we can help employees. So I've partnered recently, before we go on to the HR bit from you and you telling us about what we need, that was one of the reasons I partnered with a company recently where they have a diagnostic tool called artificial intelligence at work. So really that goes beyond the surface level of what AI is, and it delves into the implications around employee trust, their whole comfort using AI, and the confidence they have. Again, as I say, in another angle is what's happening with my data. So this tool goes in and it analyzes all this, gives wonderful data so that then employers, managers, company owners, whoever is using this tool can see what they need to put in place, whether it's policies, which are legally they need, and also then maybe they need to run workshops, allaying, looking at what their employees need, and really creating that sense of security and psychological safety by bringing in workshops to dismiss the fears that the employees have. I spoke a lot there, so I would love you to talk about the new legislation that came in around AI.
Yeah, but that foundational piece that you're doing is so important. Employers, absolutely, you need to sit down and think first. What do you actually want your policy to look like? What do you want the structures to look like in your business? And it is a big one to jump on top of now. The EU AI policy came into force as of August 1st, and there's going to be a 36-month ramp up to it. And all the AI is classified into, AI systems are classified into different risk categories. There's all those different components to it. From a HR practice perspective, most companies are going to fall under a separate heading from the 4 risk categories, which is the generative AI. So your ChatGPT, your Bard, those different AI systems that are looking at translating, and you're pumping in data and it's giving you data back. That's what most employers are going to fall into. So that's the big decision to be made, is do you want that in your business? How are you going to protect your IP if you do? Do you want an open or closed system? Ask all these different questions and put your policies in place within the next 36 months. The sooner the better.
Definitely, I think the sooner the better, because AI is being used. And I know I was on a call yesterday. It was a public sector marketing. Joanne Sweeney was giving a call, or she was doing a webinar on the importance of like the use of AI in the public sector, but it goes across to all sectors. And really, like, the conversation is around, because I think people know as well when content is AI generated. That's only one part of it, I know. Like, what's the policy around that? Companies need to really know if their employees, or like, let's say they're expecting employees to ramp up marketing, let's say, and they may think, well, there is AI there now to make your job easier, you should be using it. But if the marketer doesn't know their parameters again and their boundaries around it, do they want to be putting in all of their own private information into ChatGPT? Because what happens to that data?
Yeah.
Is it siloed? Can you talk a little bit about that, Lydia?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be aware as well of, if you ask the question of your employees now, 9 times out of 10, you're going to find at least a few people in your company that are already using it. So in some ways, the horse is on its way out the gate. So it's very important to at least start having these conversations and start brainstorming what you want, and to be aware in terms of the data. If your employees are already using it, what are they putting in? If you use ChatGPT as an example, are they using it to construct an email? Are they using it to construct a memo, a statement? Is it all staff communication? Is it, as you say, Dolores, marketing materials? What's going in there? Is it proprietary knowledge? Is it your customer or client data? So it's all those different things that, because it's a new shiny system, and it is they're great tools to use, but to just have that little bit of awareness of what data is going in, how are you protecting it when you're putting it in, who's using it in your business. And then I would say work with your in-house HR, work with a consultant to construct a policy that is going to protect your business and protect your clients and protect your employees.
Again, isn't it that exactly, being transparent and having the expectations set? It's all very well to say, yes, we have this wonderful ChatGPT and please use it, but understanding, I suppose, from every part of the company, everyone being on the same, singing from the same hymn sheet. Again, this is the policy we have in place. We don't put in client data because perhaps it might be spilled out into someone else's question in the future. So perhaps, I know that there's different ways you can do it. You can have your ChatGPT, you can have it set up where it's your own data only that you're putting in and it doesn't share it. But there again, like, do we know these things? And it's really incumbent upon us all to understand if we're expecting our staff to use these modern tools, these tools that are phenomenal and that can really be integrated very well and increase productivity, we need to have policies in place to ensure that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet with regard to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that wellness piece is where it all starts. That, as you say, the transparency is really important to have, and that open communication.
I love it. That was my as I say, it's this whole piece around, the more I see, the more work I do with companies, I realize that this whole piece of this fear and lack of understanding what's expected, the expectations, it's essential. And as I say, I just put a banner down there where if anyone wanted to check out the diagnostic tool I'm working with another company, an even better place to work, and we can go in and look after that. And Lydia can go in and help you if you don't have a dedicated HR department, or even if you want to talk to her. Who am I to say who your clients are, Lydia? Can you tell people how they can contact you, what you can help them with, and direct them to the pathway, the best way to get to you if they want to talk to you after this show?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, best way of getting in touch is hroptions.eu. So hop onto the website and you'll find all the different contact details on there. You have the phone number, the email, absolutely reach out. And it is very much a full scope offering. So whether it's start to end recruitment support, onboarding practices, employee life cycle, investigations, disciplinaries, appeals, right down to your exit interviews and your offboarding practices. I'm very happy to support at every level.
Just putting up your email address there. And also, are you open to, if people wanted to, let's say, contact you through LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Reach out whatever way works best and can sit down, have a consultation, whether it's virtual or in person, and figure out what support your business might need.
Phenomenal. Lydia, is there anything you want to leave us with today? Anything we haven't covered, anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to draw people's attention to around this whole area of HR compliance?
The key thing is very much about putting the structures in place, that your policies and procedures are very much the structure for your culture. So
culture, we didn't hit on that one, did we? Let's talk about that a little bit, actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of employers will have an idea of what their culture will be. A lot of companies will have maybe their values and their culture written down, but it's feeding them into each other, that you have your written policies and procedures that are tailored to your business, that are bespoke for what you're looking for, that you have that openness within your culture, that yes, maybe you want to go for an informal culture, which is fantastic, but also you have that communication with your employees that they still understand these are the rules of the game. This is where the goalpost is. This is where you're kicking to. And that will help to create and solidify your lived culture within the policies and procedures.
And I love the way you said the lived culture, because again, culture can be a buzzword sometimes, but culture is the invisible atmosphere that permeates through everything in an organization. It's the same whether it's in your home, it's same whether it's in, I do a lot of wellness with teams, whether it's young teams, juveniles, going in, working, and it's about that creating this invisible atmosphere, because you touched on a very important point earlier, whereas like, and I would also say that a manager can create a team culture, even if the culture of a company isn't very, isn't a lived one. So a manager might decide, well, my team, I want to create a culture of inclusivity, let's say. And I think that can have a ripple effect, because if there isn't, like if the culture in a company is, it's okay for everyone to go in 10 minutes late, that's the culture that's allowed. That's the behavior that's allowed. They know that a company then is a company that doesn't mind people being late, even though it's not written anywhere. Although it may be written, if it's not the lived culture, then nobody believes the whole policies. And I think that could be an issue where, let's say, for example, that lateness is accepted, but there's a policy in place that has actually a code of conduct that says behavior will not be accepted. Then if there's another issue that comes up where there's a policy in place but the lived culture is more in line with the policy rather than the behavior, I hope I'm not gone off point here, I think that's too where we can hit problems with culture. It has to be a lived culture. It has to be seen, what's written in the policy, to be what's actually happening within a company.
Absolutely. It's a lovely way of putting it. Yeah, very much your policies and procedures should be reflective of the culture that you want practiced in your company. And it very much comes back to your training and your coaching of your managers, that you don't want these most organizations don't want these micro cultures of this team does it this way and this team does it another way. And if you have that coaching in place for your managers, that they understand this is, as an employer, this is my expectation, this is what I am looking for from this business and from these teams, then you can sidestep a lot of that, and you can save a lot of time, money, and heartbreak going through investigations and disciplinaries, because everybody understands from the get-go the expectations.
I love it. And I know you talk about, I know when we spoke before as well, and you said it at the beginning, it's about this bookend, isn't it, of you have to have a structure in place before you can do anything really in any part of life. Again, it's not just in the workplace. We need to build a structure, and then we build on the structure. And when the structure is solid, then everything that we build on that structure will be more solid as well. And we create safety from the solid structures that we built.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Lydia, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on this morning. Loved what we talked about. Love that I now know new legislation changes. I have your website flashing along there in the banner at the end. If anybody wants to connect with you, hroptions.eu. Thanks a million for being here, Lydia. I really enjoyed the conversation. And for anyone that wants to connect with myself in relation to the workplace wellbeing, I do, and also the addition of this diagnostic tool that I've introduced to help to be the left brain for my business. I have that going across the banner at the end. Happy for you to reach out, and on LinkedIn, send me a direct message. And the same for Lydia. Thanks for being here, everyone. Thanks to those who watch it on replay. Thank you to those who are on Instagram that I can't see right now because I'm on StreamYard. And it's also gone live on YouTube. So thank you, everyone, for making this conversation the one it was. Thanks, Lydia.
Thank you very much for having me, Dolores. It's great to speak with you. Thank you.
We'll talk to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you.